Okay, guys, I am here at Best Buy because I had to come down here so that I could grab the Steelbook edition of Flashdance. I don't know why. I was compelled. So I'm going to go run in there and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, now that people are looking at me like I'm strange, I am strange. Here it is from Best Buy, the 4K Steelbook Special Edition. That's what it looks like on the back. Can you see that? Pretty cool. Okay, I'm gonna go back home now and we'll eventually unbox this and we'll go right to that and I'll see you there. Okay, here we go. Now, hey, first things first, let's not call this a hobby. Let's call movie collecting, let's call it what it is. And that is, it's a passion. That's what it is. It's a passion. We're passionate people. That's why you're watching this today. That's why you want to know what's going on with the 4K. You know what's funny? I totally forgot the little cover that goes with it. I apologize. I've already somewhat unboxed this. Now listen, if you like this type of content, please subscribe. That's all I'll ask you to do. Just please subscribe, right? You can like the content. That's great. Watch some of my other videos. That'd be awesome. And we'll have a conversation about these things. So now we have Flashdance 4K. And this is the Steelbook edition. And this is the guy, I can't think of his name right now. The guy from Mid-Level Media convinced me, right, to watch him on YouTube. He convinced me to get this edition. I was going to get the original edition, you know, just the standard. We'll call it the standard edition. I was going to get the standard edition, and instead I ended up getting the Steelbook. And I drove down, if you saw my short, I drove down to Best Buy to pick this up. And so we got Jennifer Beals on the cover as her character Alex. I have to look up the last name, I don't remember. And then we have Yes, What a Feeling on the back. And then let's go and look inside quickly. I'm gonna watch thing, and you got the Blu-ray and the 4K HDR. And let me take these discs out. I don't like doing this. A lot of us, we're not going to take out the Blu-ray. And right, so you have some of the artwork. We're gonna, hopefully, if I remember, we'll talk about this right here. We'll talk about this in a second. But I'll put this back in. So there's a lot of things to cover. So it's nice. It's got the 4K. It's got the 4K digital along with it. So that's great. So first off, in talking about this film, I need a stand. I should just put this up here. In talking about this film, let's start. Let's go back to 1983, right? So it's 1983, and I am 12 years old, and this is an R-rated movie. I was staying over my grandmother's for either the weekend or the week, probably giving my parents a break. And my parents were very strict, but they were not strict about the things that I watched or listened to or read or anything like that. So my aunt and my grandmother, my aunt came up and she was going to take us, take my grandmother to the movies that day anyway. And they decided, well, what are we going to go see? And they wanted to go see the new dance movie, right? Flashdance. Of course, Flashdance was, became this big cultural phenomenon. So we went down to see the movie, and back in those days, they had ushers, right? Because we were in the Boston area at that time, and they had ushers with flashlights, bring you to your seat, all that stuff. And my grandmother had this huge purse, this massive purse, and it was filled with everything you can imagine. It was filled with sandwiches. It was filled with soda. It was cans, right? It was filled with candy and chips, and everything that you could ever want was in that purse. So, it's interesting because this film, at 12 years old, I felt like it was a little bit disjointed. right? And it had some pacing issues. But watching it as an adult, I was more, I'll tell you, I was way more entertained than I expected to be. I think this film kind of holds up pretty well. And compared to the movies of the last few years, I mean, this movie is highly, highly entertaining. And it's really not as disjointed or muddled as some other films that I've seen more recently. And back then, one thing that they really did was they put the time in to make a decent movie. Now, there's problems because of the 4K, and it's not the transfer's fault. It's the way things were shot. But it has nothing to do with the image. So keep listening, because I have some interesting things for you here to think about. Because there's really a lot to talk about. There's a lot to unpack with this film, which I think is pretty interesting, and I think you might find it interesting as well. So in the beginning, when you see Jennifer Grey, right, she's trying to be a dancer, and she is a dancer, but she wants to be a professional dancer of some form. Is it ballet? Is it modern dance? Does it really matter? It doesn't. It doesn't matter. But that's what she wants. She wants to be a dancer. But how is she making the majority of her income? And that is, she's working as a welder, right? And this was something. Now, this story is based on a true life story, and we'll talk about that. But this story, although based on a true life story, this was not the norm back in the 80s, women working on a construction site like this. I'm not saying it didn't happen, because we know it did, but it wasn't normal, wasn't usual. And they weren't subverting expectations as much back in the 80s, right? No, of course not. They did to some extent, even in the 70s with Alien, but they didn't subvert your expectations all the time. So it was a little bit more of a shock when you see Jennifer Beals take off her mask, her welding mask, and it's a woman, right? So it had a little bit more cultural impact because of that, I think. Now, with her character, and with all the characters here, you could say they're a little bit cardboard, right? There's not a lot to them. We don't know a lot about them. And I think with Jennifer Beals' character, right, her Alex, with Alexandra Alex Owens, right, that's her name in here. So what's interesting about this, her character back then, now you got to understand, this is the 1980s. Things are a little bit different. The dream of teenagers back then, for most of us, I'm going to speak for all of us, and I'm sure it's not true for everyone, especially those working, well, we'll say living in a working class environment. What we really wanted back then was to be independent. We wanted to be on our own. We didn't want to live at home with our family. We wanted to move out. So you don't really have to give a reason why 18-year-old Alex Owens has moved out. Maybe she had problems with her family. Maybe there was a death in the family. Who knows? Maybe she just decided she wanted to be out on her own and doing her own thing. This was not unusual. It was more unusual for a younger person. If they didn't go to college, they went and they worked somewhere, whether it was construction or they worked in a factory when we had them in this country, in the United States. And so what Alex really is, for a lot of us who wanted to do something creative with our lives, she is us. Like, whether she's male or female, it doesn't really matter. We project ourselves onto her in some ways, because what she's doing, as a 13-year-old, you dream of being an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, because you want to be, at least we did, we wanted to be self-sufficient. We wanted to go out into the world, right? Like she does. So she's living in this little loft apartment where she can do her practicing. And as a martial artist for 35 years, I understand, this idea of practicing and everything. And so she's in this apartment, and she has a dog, and she has a day job, and she has a night job where she dances, right? But the main point of this is that this is who we kind of wanted to be. It's not that we wanted to be dancers, right? Or anything like that, but we wanted to go out into the world and be who we were, and be away from our parents' prying eyes. And she in this movie is living the dream. So as a young person, you could really project yourself onto her. And that's what really works. Now, the interesting thing here is that she's working at a cabaret, right? It's like a working class cabaret. Tell me in the comments, but please, leave me comments on this movie. I'd love to see it right down there. We'll talk about movies. It's interesting, but right, she's working at this cabaret, right? It's a working class cabaret. There's all these guys there to see the women, but it's kind of, so what I was asking is, were there really any places like this? I think this is an invention for the movie, right? They created this idea because they wanted to contrast it with this strip joint where one of the other dancers works. I don't want to go too far into it, and I don't want to create any spoilers if you haven't seen the movie yet. But that's what they were doing. They were creating this type of contrast between that. So, it wasn't quite wholesome, but it wasn't that bad. It was somewhere in between. And things were looked at differently back in the 80s than they are today. And you can tell that by everything that goes on and the attitudes and all that stuff. It was just a different time. And before I go any further than that, I should talk to you a little bit about the transfer. The transfer is amazing. Transfer is amazing. Looks very filmic. There's, light grain structure. The HDR is not overdone or overblown. There's a good amount of color depth. The scene, there's a flashing light scene, if you might remember that that's done particularly well with HDR. If you get seizures or anything like that, do not watch that part of the film. They did, a fantastic job bringing this in, but into the 4K realm. But here's interesting. Now, I don't know, and I didn't look it up before I pressed to record here. I don't know what aspect ratio this originally came out in. I'm going to assume it's the same, but it appeared to be on my TV. It was in anamorphic widescreen, which I don't have a problem with. It's, I prefer director's intent. If it's a wider shot, I prefer that. But when it does take up the full screen, you do get more immersion, and it's nice. And I did like that. So if leave that in the comments and we'll talk about it. But it's interesting. But they did a really good job. There are only a few scenes where there's a lot of light. Sometimes the light in street lights is a little bit dimmer than you'd expect from HDR. And sometimes it's as bright as normal with some of the headlights in the cars. So they did. So it's what I'm saying is it's not so overblown in every scene. And I think that works. At times it's muted. Alex's character, she has an older love interest, not a really scandalous thing. She is only 18 now. Jennifer Beals was 20 when she made this film, playing an 18-year-old. That's not unusual either. Her love interest in the film is Nick Hurley, played by Michael Nouri. And he's a good 10, 12 years older than Jennifer Beals in this. And, it's still, they still make it kind of a sweet love story. And there's all these, I'll call them vignettes. All these little vignettes, all these, there's a comedian and what's his story. And, he's got a small arc, and then there's, his love interest, and she has a small arc. I won't go too far into that. And there's all these little things. This is this older woman that she knows who was a dancer. There's, so we see her dreams, and there's also a character who wants to be a figure skater. And there's a really, I don't want to say too much, but there's a really good, it's a good scene. It's, the typical scene where parents say probably what they shouldn't say. And they probably say what they shouldn't say because they were unable to do something or unable to do certain things in their lives. And they have a cynicism And sometimes it's because they don't want their kids to get hurt. Sometimes until they see their kid do something, they don't believe they can do it. And then there's this nice moment afterwards. And I think it all works, despite being a little bit jumbled. I think it really works. Now, unfortunately, the woman, Sunny Johnson, who plays Jeannie Zabo, died like a year later. She died in 1984. This was her last film. She unfortunately she suffered a brain hemorrhage, from what I can see here, and she remained on life support until the following day when she was declared clinically dead, without any hope of recovery, and she was taken off of life support. So it's interesting. It's sad. It's interesting when you go back to these older films, and it's hard to think of like a film from '83 being older, but it is today. Now, what's really interesting, let me grab this for a second. Where did I put it? Here it is. So Cynthia Rhodes plays Penny. Well, first off, in Flashdance, she plays Tina Tech. In Staying Alive, she plays Jackie. So she's in Staying Alive, another dance film, and she's a real dancer. And she also played Penny in Dirty Dancing. And we have the Dirty Dancing 4K because I had to have the Dirty Dancing 4K. Have you seen this? Let me just show you. Now, that's a nice 4K too. It's Steelbook 4K. Whoop, wait a minute. I already used the code, but just to make it. So she plays the second main dancer in that film opposite Patrick Swayze. So I thought that was interesting. I always go and just kind of like Svengoolie, if you have watched Svengoolie, and maybe you haven't, he has a section where when you're going through these movies, he talks about these different people, and I find it interesting. So let's talk about the critical response to this. Now, I do movie reviews on House of Mystery on KCAA 106.5 FM, right, in Los Angeles, even though I live in Massachusetts. But I do these film reviews, and I try to look at film through a different lens than, mainstream critics. I've also thought about talking about why I think some movie reviewers on YouTube may not be giving you all the full truth of the matter. What do you think about that? You want to see a video like that? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. But here it is. Now, supposedly the site's consensus on Rotten Tomatoes is all style, very little substance. Flashdance boasts eye-catching dance sequences and benefits from an appealing performance from Jennifer Beals, but its narrative is flat-footed. Yeah, maybe, but I still found this movie very, very entertaining. So I disagree with it. It gets 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it deserves a lot more than that. I would still give this, for what it is, for the type of movie that it is, for a dance movie, for maybe a coming of age film, for a look at people who are creative and are trying to make it, and for a film that could be somewhat inspirational, I would give this 4 stars. I really would, especially today. Back in the 80s, compared to everything else, I'd probably give it 3. But its cultural impact alone was incredible, and people loved it. And people loved the soundtrack. Roger Ebert, who I watched religiously, but very rarely agreed with him, placed it on his list of most hated films, and he gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars. And he stated that Jennifer Beals shouldn't feel bad. She's a natural talent. She's fresh and engaging here, and only needs to find an agent with a natural talent for turning down scripts. I totally disagree. And he said that if Flashdance had spent a little more effort getting to know the heroine of its story and a little less time trying to rip off Saturday Night Fever, it might have been a much better film. Now, do I agree with him on that? Although there are some similarities. I think Saturday Night Fever is a darker film, much darker than this. And I do think it's different. Which makes me think of something. I hope this isn't too rambling and too. I didn't make notes. I'm kind of relying on my memory. But here's something I was going to tell you about, and you might be waiting for it. So we get this idea of 4K. Now, from the time that I saw it in the theater, there's a scene, and it's the flashing light dance scene, where strobe light dance scene, we'll call it. And Jennifer Beals as her character Alex, is supposed to be dancing. but it's not her. It's another woman. It's her body double and her dance double in white mime type makeup. Isn't that interesting? Now, it's confusing because you see her and you know who she's supposed to be. And I think she has, she's wearing a wig. And you're like, that's not Jennifer Beals. And I knew that. And so that scene kind of confused me. Like, who is this? Now, as an adult, I can tell that that's supposed to be Alex, Jennifer Beals' character, but it's not. And in 4K, you can really tell. And so we have the finale, the dance scene. It's a huge, huge scene. It's been parodied along with the waterfall. She hits the chain and the water comes down. That's a big scene. People expect that it was a much bigger scene because it's so well remembered, but it happens very quickly. And it was probably shown in trailers and all that. And it became this big thing. But the end scene, you can tell, especially on 4K, definitely in 4K now, maybe not before, you can tell Jennifer Beals does not do any of the dance scene. They don't cut away to her face like they do in other scenes. All as soon as she goes out on the dance floor, it's this other woman, and you can totally tell. And it reminds me, have you watched Star Trek in HD, the original series? Let me know if you have down in the comments, because if you watch Star Trek, the original series, what you'll notice is anytime there's a fight scene, there are cutaways. There are these cutaway fight scenes. And what ends up happening is they have stunt doubles, and you can see it's a stunt double. You can totally tell. There's one scene where you have Spock, who's like the mirror Spock, who has the beard, and the stunt double doesn't even have a fake beard on, right? So, people, had smaller TVs back in the 60s, standard definition. A lot of times their TVs were black and white. So they really weren't worried about that stuff. Well, whichever version you get, this is, you're going to watch the ending scene. You're going to be like, what? Right? Or the next to the ending scene, you're going to watch the final dance scene. You're going to be like, You just have to kind of pretend that's Alex. All right, that's Alex. Well, we'll pretend about that. So did you pick this up? Did you pick up the Steelbook? Did you pick up the regular version? Have you watched the film elsewhere? Did you watch it digitally? Did you watch it back in the day? Let me know in the comments. Talk about it. Talk about what you thought of the film. I was extremely entertained. I had a great time. My wife watched this, I think, on cable, like on HBO or something, a million times. And was really surprised at how much she remembered from the film. And she's like, I must have watched this a lot. But I would say this is definitely a pickup. If you like this movie, if you were just mildly amused by this movie, if you liked it just a little bit, I would suggest picking this up. Now, you can pick it up any way you want. And I suggest if you do so, right now, I don't have any affiliate links. So go to your favorite YouTuber and use their affiliate links so that you can give back to their channel. Eventually, I'll have affiliate links up because why not? Why not? Then you can help support the channel. That'd be great. You can pick it up as a Steelbook. There's still some left at Best Buy. There were only a couple at each location, and I went to one location in Marlborough, Massachusetts. They probably have one more of these left. And they did a great job with it, and I like it. So you can get the standard edition, get this edition, get the digital edition. I have a DVD around here somewhere. Here it is. Here it is. My parents picked this up somewhere, probably at a Goodwill or something, and they had never seen it. And there's the disc. And yeah, matter of fact, that's kind of what the other version looks like for the 4K. But I know they didn't think this was a great film, but I liked it. I was highly entertained. One thing to watch out for, I don't know if you can see, I think I just made a little mark on it. That's okay. I mean, at least it's dark. I can probably just hit it with a little bit of a marker or something like that. So maybe this does chip a little bit. I must have just done that because being a little careless, it doesn't matter that much. I need another one. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about the MTV connection because, it's interesting that in MTV, had probably just started around that time, and we didn't have it in our area. We had, by 85, we had a local station called V66. And V66 played all sorts of videos at the time until, and I'm sure it's like this around the country, MTV contacted all the record companies and said, if you want us to play your video, you have to give us a 6-month exclusive. It was something like that. And that effectively put all these small stations that played videos out of business, because nobody wanted to wait 6 months before a new video came out to watch it. So definitely there's a lot of, it is kind of like watching a string of music videos at times. And in that way, it's strangely kind of like a musical, but this might be one of the first times that this type of music video thing was done. We have it in Rocky IV, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. I saw it before I even knew anything about MTV, but it probably, the success of the movie with the viewing public probably kind of showed that MTV was the way of the future, at least for a period of time, until MTV stopped playing music. Yes, I'm old enough to remember when MTV was a music station, right? That's great. Now, let me just talk about one more thing here. Flashdance was inspired by the real life story of Maureen Marder, a construction worker and welder by day and dancer by night at Gimlet's, a Toronto strip club. And what's terrible about this is that she sold her movie rights. And I know that this isn't really her story. This is kind of somewhat based on it. Took a lot of liberties with it. She sold it for $2,300. And she was never able to win a case because she had a terrible lawyer at the time and she signed away all her rights. So that's kind of a sad thing, a sad state of affairs. But, with stuff like that, I always suggest, and I suggest this to writers, if somebody takes your idea or whatever and they make a lot of money and you can't sue them, you can't, if that's not going to work, then you're the original and you use that movie as a way to advertise yourself. So that's something that she could have done. I don't know if she did that. I don't know what happened, but just an interesting little tidbit that I found out. So let me know in the comments. Let me know if you're going to pick this up. Let me know which version you're going to pick up. Let me know if you're not going to pick it up. It'd be interesting. I think this is an enjoyable film. I think you'll like it. And I think they did a really good job. I think they did, decent with packaging. Now, just be careful. I think I just did that. So hopefully, I wish it had happened on the back instead of on the front, but that's okay. It's gonna bother me forever now. So, did you like this little chat we had? Would you like to have more? Let me know, not only in the comments, but by subscribing and by liking. And I will do more movies, more movie reviews. We'll talk about physical media. We'll talk about digital media, because it's all good. It's all good. And we'll have a good time. So I just want to thank you. And feel free to watch the next video. I think I'll be putting it here or someplace, or down here, or down in the comments. Okay. I'll see you next time. Okay.